The windowless monument to modernism that is the Long Lines building looms mysteriously over Church Street in Manhattan's financial district. Passers-by look up questioningly at the austere concrete edifice. The building's sculptural forms recall the architecture of the ancient Mayans and Egyptians, a sublime geometry that serves as a striking counterpoint to the neighboring glass and steel structures, like the newly built condominium tower at 56 Leonard Street, designed by Swiss architecture firm Herzog and de Meuron. The only sensory outlets are the protruding ventilation openings on the 10th and 29th floors that look like gaping mouths taking in modernism's last gasp. When construction of the building was completed in 1974, the United States was in the midst of an unprecedented economic crisis in which the nation was plagued by both high unemployment and high inflation. Keynesianism, the dominant economic ideology of the time, had previously regarded inflation and economic stagnation as mutually exclusive phenomena. Thus, Keynesian theory was ill-equipped to deal with this peculiar economic situation, which came to be referred to as stagflation. This unprecedented crisis provoked the politicians and the technocrats to begin to search for alternative strategies.
It's clear that the true problems of our nation are much deeper than gasoline lines or energy shortages, deeper even than inflation or recession.
But when the ground opened up for an alternative ideology to step into the driver's seat of history, the left was nowhere to be found.
Well, come on, all of you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. We're all gonna die.
The attempted reconstitution of a revolutionary left that had begun in the 1960s had started to fizzle by the early 1970s, and had lost its major raison d'etre once the United States withdrew from Vietnam in 1975.
What are we fighting for?
Thus, the ideas of neoliberalism and the aesthetic expressions of postmodernism that had already been brewing in relative obscurity for many years were left as the only obvious contenders to fill the ideological vacuum left by the collapse of the Keynesian consensus. By 1972, Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown had already published Learning from Las Vegas, their classic text that first outlined the ideological underpinnings of postmodernist architecture. In the book, Venturi and Brown posit a retreat from the grand narratives of modernity into a new ideal defined by pluralism. One in which buildings, rather than assuming the form of austere glass boxes in the international style, would be adorned with the symbols and ornaments of the local culture. But what Brown, Venturi, and their epigonies dismiss in their rejection of modernist architecture is not simply a bunch of dull gray rectangles. It is the rejection of a universal history of humanity, and the rejection of a utopian vision as the culmination of that history. In his essay, Capitalism or Late Industrial Society, Theodor Adorno says that, quote, pluralism lends support to the utopian belief that utopia already exists. It serves to mollify us. And that is precisely what postmodernism has done. Postmodernism capitulates to the already existing as the best possible form of appearance. It supposes that the Paraha people of the Amazon River Basin, the Sentinelese of the Andaman Islands, the goat herders of Mongolia, the oil refinery workers of Alberta, and the investment bankers of Wall Street do not all share a common historical trajectory and goal. Each has its own utopia. It is unpopular today to defend modernism. The conquest of reason over nature supposedly exhausted itself in the 20th century.
The same men who in the past 20 years designed and built over 70 million passenger cars and trucks are bending their wills and their talents to the task of building weapons for the protection of America.
Science, technology, and humanity's incredible productive capacities culminated in Auschwitz and the atomic bomb.
A scientific thunderbolt gives a preview of its destructive force.
But the unfinished utopian project of modernism remains. The alienated reason that was instrumentalized to produce the horrors of the 20th century must be transformed into the self-conscious use of reason, directed towards man's own utopian ends, and not towards the ends of capital and imperialism. This vision of a universal utopia, derived from the conscious utilization of the accumulated knowledge of all of humanity, has become quite opaque to the present, just as the long lines building may appear opaque to its passers-by. But the task of freedom set forth by modernity, also like the long lines building itself, was built to withstand a nuclear blast. Just saying.